To start off our privacy and security session, we have Julio Poveda, and when the sword becomes the shield. So we'll unpack this. The stage is yours. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julio, and today I will be presenting an ongoing project my collaborators and I are working on, titled When the Sword Becomes a Shield, analyzing security advice for survivors of intimate partner violence on Reddit and Twitter. Before moving on, I would like to highlight that I will be talking about technology abuse, which is a distressing topic. If you don't feel comfortable listening to this presentation, I will give you a moment to leave the room or mute myself. Intimate partner violence, also referred to as IPV, is a public health problem that affects millions worldwide. It is estimated that 1 out of 3 women suffer from IPV throughout their lives, and around 20% of domestic violence victims are men. Over the past few years, digital technologies have been utilized by abusers to monitor and harass their victims. And these technologies include trackers like Apple AirTags and smart home devices like smart speakers. Despite the technology abuse they've been through, survivors utilize technologies in many ways. For example, survivors use social media platforms to share their experiences to help others and ask for technology advice. This is an example of a Reddit post in which a primary survivor, someone that has directly suffered from IPV, asks for advice on how to identify and remove stalkerware or spyware on their phone. And this is a tweet in which a secondary survivor, a friend or family member, in other cases of the primary survivor, asks for help on iCloud accounts to support the primary survivor. Taking this into account, our project seeks to answer 2 main questions. First, what technology abuse experiences are survivors sharing on social media, in particular on Reddit and Twitter? And second, is the technology advice survivors receive via these platforms safe for them in the sense that it doesn't put their life at risk because of escalation of abuse? We conducted a pilot study in which we gathered tweets and Reddit posts on IPV and technology abuse. After filtering out irrelevant tweets and Reddit posts, we analyzed 12 tweets obtained by using 20 different hashtags, and we also analyzed 50 Reddit posts obtained from 4 subreddits. We did iterative coding and lexical analysis of this gathered data. And currently, we are improving our data gathering pipeline to work with more tweets and Reddit posts, and we are using a combination of hashtags to obtain useful information for this project. Additionally, we are evaluating technology advice, particularly targeted at survivors of IPV. This is the codebook that we consolidated as a result of our pilot study. We identified that survivors receive different kinds of technology advice, and we categorized them into these 4 main categories. For example, the category that you see on the top right corner is how survivors use technology or are encouraged to use technology to emotionally cope with abuse. And here we have actions like record abuse as a reminder of its severity. And right now, on our ongoing study, we are collecting more tweets, and this has helped us to identify the particular technologies survivors are concerned about and they are advised on. And from the data that we have gathered so far, the particular tweets, 35% of them mention or are related to stalkerware, also known as spyware. And 15% of these tweets talk about tracking devices, which include Apple AirTags and Tile trackers. In summary, we conducted a pilot study in which we gathered tweets and Reddit posts on IPV and technology abuse. And currently, we are improving and expanding our project so that we can provide insights into how support organizations and individuals can better design and share technology advice for survivors of intimate partner violence. I will be on the poster session if you have any questions or would like to talk more about this project. Thank you.
Julio, thank you very much. Important project and one that is going underway, so lots of opportunity for feedback in those questions. So next up, we have a colleague who's unable to join us today. This is Noah Warford. And so we have a very short video that will give some quick highlights of the project.
Hello, my name is Noah Warford, and today I'll be presenting a framework for unifying at-risk user research. Before I start, I'd like to thank my colleagues at UMD, Caitlin, Omer, Nathan, and my advisor, Michelle, and Google, Tara, Sunny, Patrick, Manya, and Kurt. At-risk users are people who experience risk factors like societal factors, relationships, or personal circumstances that augment or amplify their chances of being digitally attacked and or suffering disproportionate harms. So the question is, how do we design for these users? Common advice in the literature is to consider these at-risk users in the research and technology design processes, but this can be bewildering given the huge variety and scope of needs that they experience. Accordingly, we present a synthesis of this work to guide research and technology development. Here's a summary of the at-risk framework's major components. We identified the factors that augment or amplify digital safety risk for these users, divided into 3 broad categories: broad societal factors, specific relationships that expose them to risk, and a variety of personal circumstances that elevate digital safety risk. We also identified 3 categories of protective practices and strategies at-risk users employ to ameliorate these risks. Strategies that rely on their social networks and connections, reducing the use of or distancing themselves from technology, and specific technical tools and solutions. While the individual practices in these categories will change over time, we believe the larger categories are comprehensive. During the thematic analysis that led to the development of the at-risk framework, we also identified a set of barriers that prevented at-risk users from adopting protective practices as informed by the particular contextual factors they experienced, including priorities that competed strongly with digital safety, a lack of knowledge leading to particularly severe outcomes, or assumptions about technology that are broken by their personal circumstances and experiences. So how do we use this framework? It can be used to guide research and technology design. In research, we can identify new populations who might experience some of these contextual risk factors and are therefore worthy of study. We can investigate how these factors interact to create new experiences. And we can also help guide how this research is conducted in the future. For technology design, this framework allows us to consider at-risk users at scale. We can consider the contextual risk factors and protective practices rather than having to do the impossible task of including dozens and dozens of different groups in one's design process. We can also help target usability improvements to where they are most needed by working to break down the barriers to effective practices. And we can help balance the risk and benefits of new technologies by providing this framework that lets one consider these different types of populations. So in summary, we developed this framework for understanding at-risk users, which enumerates 10 contextual risk factors and a set of protective practices that they employ. The framework also reveals barriers to implementing secure behaviors, and we provide a direction for research and technology moving forward in this space. If you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to check out our paper at IEEE Security and Privacy 2022, or send me an email as listed here on the slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Noel. Applause. So the third talk we have in our privacy and security session is we have Nathan Reitinger here, who will be giving us some discussion regarding deniability in secure messaging. Thanks, Nathan.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nathan Reitinger. I'm going to be presenting this talk. Yep. Is cryptographic deniability sufficient? Non-expert perceptions of deniability in secure messaging. This is work I've done with my colleagues, Omer, Nathan, Michelle, and Ian. So if I showed you this screenshot, and asked you, is this real or fake? You very likely would want to know additional context before deciding if this person, Artem Fowler, actually said this. Good, got any more bribes you want me to sign? As long as you keep paying me, I'll sign whatever you want. So The context would be that this supposedly this comes from a jury, and this is the only piece of evidence that the prosecution gives you. Would you say that this person is guilty of bribery? So this may seem a bit odd, but often this is how these types of leaks are presented in the real world, with a lot of drilling down into what was said and very little drilling down into the verification of what was said. So researchers have looked at this issue before, and if you ask a cryptographer what the answer should be, is this real or fake, they would say, absolutely, this is fake. We know that because there's no cryptographic proof of authorship. So researchers back in 2007 decided to encapsulate this idea of what's real and what's fake in a protocol. And they called it the off-the-record protocol. And this is the same type of protocol that's used in widely used secure messaging protocols like Signal or Telegram. So this is the understanding of what you get when you have repudiation or deniability, that this is fake, right? But is anybody actually going to believe this? So nobody's done a user study on this until we did it. And the question is, at least the question I'm talking about today, is would anybody believe this if you showed them this and gave them that backstory? To test this, we developed a user study that first showed the user the screenshot that I showed before, and then provided rebuttal evidence that this hypothetical governor, that Arden Fowler, would have. Either please don't believe this. I say it's fake. That should be enough. That's our control. Or something like, we're going to bring in an expert who's going to testify that this is absolutely fake because there's no cryptographic proof. Conditions like that. And then we ask them, who do you believe? Is Arden Fowler telling the truth, or is he lying? And is your belief enough to vote guilty or not guilty? So it might be surprising that we found that a majority of people believed that this text message was real, even without any additional evidence. So this is just a short teaser talk, and I'll be at the poster session so you can ask me more questions there. But basically, this understanding that cryptographers have, if you have repudiation, the absence of cryptographic proof, you'll have deniability, doesn't really hold up in the real world. So in summary, a deniability protocol is necessary, something like OTR, but may not be sufficient. And if you'd like to learn more, I'll be at the poster session, like I said. You can also look me up there. Thanks.
Very much, Nathan. So, Sonia, we'll move on to smart homes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sonia Park. I'm a second-year PhD student at the iSchool, and today I'll be talking about my research on shared mental models of smart home privacy. So first of all, what's a mental model? Mental model is a representation of how people think things work. Mental models could be applied to abstract concepts such as privacy and security, and mental models research in privacy and security has been focused on individual. But when you think about it, smart homes are necessarily shared. It's shared with household members, visitors, and even people outside of the house. So what I wanted to do was understand what is a shared understanding of people who use smart homes and how does that relate to privacy? For the length of this talk, I will focus on the first research question of my study. So my study was conducted in several stages. First, I recruit participants via personal connections and social media, and I categorize them into different user types. So primary users are the ones who manage and use the devices. Secondary users use the devices, and bystanders are not do not do any of those. And these participants in households participate in a group interview, which involves a drawing activity that asks, so how do you think a smart home technology work? What's the structure and what's the ecosystem? And then participants present and explain their drawings. I have several stages in my data analysis also, but I will focus on the drawing analysis part for this study. So I apply a novel method to my drawing analysis, which is comparing users' mental models to a conceptual model. So the IoT reference model is a conceptual model for this study, which explains entities and data flow in the smart home ecosystem. The involved entities are the user, smart home devices, cloud, and third parties. And they involved in different interaction phases, which is interaction, sending the data, processing, and distributing and presenting it to the user again. So what I do is I take two steps, which is I analyze individual mental models, and then I analyze them in a group level, which is between household members. So individual mental models are analyzed based on the IoT reference model. So if you can see, and range from simple to advanced. Simple mental models identify one or two entities, and advanced mental models identify all the entities in the smart home ecosystem. So for example, this participant 9 has an advanced model which identified all the elements in the smart home ecosystem. And then I compare these mental models between household members and sort them by similarities and differences. So what I found was, on an individual level, first, all primary users involved themselves in installing the devices. And when mental models are spread from simple to advanced, they have certain characteristics. So for example, simple mental models are based on physical layouts of the devices. So they're able to identify the user and the smart home devices. Intermediate mental models adds another layer on that, which identifies the network, but they do not identify the cloud. Advanced mental models, they're based on network topology, and most importantly, they always have the cloud in their mental models. In the household level, group level, I found some patterns. So primary users tended to have more advanced mental models than secondary users, which is not really surprising. So households that have primary and secondary users have different mental models. But there were two households where there was a clear distinction between primary and secondary users, but they still had overlapping mental models. And the overlapping part was the cloud. So why is this happening? There are two reasons. First, primary users in these households, they have professions in privacy and security. And also they try to explain how smart home technology works to the secondary user. And of course, there were households where there were both primary users in the household, and they had similar mental models, but then tended to be simple models. So what do we get out from here? So there are two suggestions from my end, which is that, so it seems like when people participate in installing the devices, they have a better understanding of how smart home technology works. So I encourage all users to participate in installing the devices to have a better understanding of the technology. And also, primary users are in a good position to help shape secondary users' mental models. So they should educate secondary users in their household. Thank you, and I'll be open to questions.
Sonia, thank you. So please do stop by, poster afterwards. We now have our final presentation for our privacy and security sets. Lana Blinder, and we'll move to the education sphere and take a look at some curriculum innovations.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alana Blinder. I'm a first-year PhD student at the iSchool. And today I'll be speaking about research that I've been conducting with Jessica Vitak, Tammy Clegg, and Marshni Chetty to design privacy and security curriculum for elementary school students and teachers. So you might be thinking, why privacy and security education for such young kids who are unlikely to be using social media or to have their own phones? But the truth is that today, even our youngest children are engaging in online activities, both recreationally and in their classrooms, whether those classrooms are in person or remote, as we saw for much of 2020 and 2021. And so it's become increasingly important to teach kids how to contend with the many online privacy and security threats they face and will continue to face as digital citizens. So in response, our team is engaging with 3 key stakeholder groups: elementary school teachers, with whom we're designing and testing instructional resources that hopefully will be easily integratable into their very busy school days; elementary students, to really understand and address their everyday privacy and security concerns, and that's the group that I'll be focusing on today; and finally, parents, to understand how we can build and reinforce homeschool connections that can further support student learning. And so in research that predates my involvement in this project, our team learned that this type of education really has to move beyond rigid lists of do's and don'ts so that we can support children in thinking critically about their privacy-related decisions, like not just in the here and now, right, but also in a landscape of perpetually evolving technologies, risks, and considerations. And so in this study, we used the game, Would You Rather, to support children between the ages of 7 and 12 in considering their priorities and some of the trade-offs associated with their privacy-related decisions. And we ran the activity, how do I scroll? Oh, well, we ran the activity online with a total of 21 children in 3 different intergenerational participatory design groups here at Maryland, at the University of Washington, and at Boise State University. And so kids voted by either positioning their hand above or below their head or using the Zoom icons you see here to indicate their choices or their indecision in the case of I don't know. And then after voting, we engaged in a group discussion about their rationales and the potential implications of their choices. And so one strategy among several that we found useful, especially for the younger children, was posing questions that can help kids draw connections between their offline privacy and security concerns, which tend to be more concrete and familiar, to their online privacy concerns, which may feel a bit more abstract. And so in this example, we asked kids to decide if they'd rather sacrifice their physical safety and perhaps the safety of their families by giving a stranger their house key, or if they'd rather let a stranger read their diary to learn their personal secrets. And kids took this seemingly straightforward question in a variety of directions. So for example, one 8-year-old who changed his response during our conversation recalled how someone had recently stolen his dad's keys and broken into his car, and that his dad, in response, was able to simply change the locks to prevent future break-ins. And so in a formal classroom context, a teacher might take this analogy a step further by prompting students to consider the implications of updating a password when a security breach has occurred, and the potential repercussions of the theft of their personal belongings, or in this case, their personal information, as well as thinking about the steps they might take to prevent their information from being compromised in the future. And what am I doing? So over the next month, we plan to complete our analysis of this data to further inform our corresponding co-design sessions with teachers from our 2 partner schools. And these are already underway, and we're working with teachers to transform this Would You Rather activity into a more robust learning experience with opportunities for students to demonstrate their evolving understanding and their shifting priorities, along with home activities to share with their families. And so we're looking forward to piloting these lessons in the classroom this fall so that they can be further developed and refined. In closing, I'd like to thank our project PIs and student researchers, our teacher co-design partners, and the NSF for funding this work. Thank you.
Wonderful, Alana. Thank you very much. And that is the end of our privacy session. So if we want to have a quick moment of applause for Julio and Noel and Nathan and Sanyap and Alana, thank you.